Are we supposed to sit back and relax and not question the fact that our great idea has not worked? As I was saying over dinner, there is no way a company or a government, a political party, could survive for 60 years with this scorecard. And yet, we as a global society turn a blind eye to Africa. I should also tell you that we have tried many different ways of delivering the aid. So in the 1960s, there was a lot of focus on aid for infrastructure. In the 1970s, we thought, you know what, that's not such a good idea. We want to target poverty. In the 1980s, they threw away that idea and said we're going to focus on structural adjustment and stabilization policies to try and get more private sector involved. In the 1990s, the pendulum swung back and people said they didn't like the structural adjustment programs, and the focus became democracy and governance. We're now in the 2000s, and it's become a free-for-all. The African agenda has been completely hijacked by celebrities. It's outrageous, and I say this as an African, that you rarely hear from African leaders about what the plan is to reduce poverty and to get our economy growing. The people who attend the G20 meetings, the World Economic Forum, the big meetings discussing Africa are actually the celebrities. And that is a double standard, because that is something that you as Canadians or international citizens would never tolerate for your own societies. Can you imagine a situation where President Obama doesn't say anything about the financial crisis or the fact that 10% of Americans, 1 in 10 Americans, is out of work, but instead maybe Mick Jagger is out there talking about it? It would be intolerable. But somehow, we as global citizens have found that quite comfortable where Africa is concerned. You should not want to hear from me this evening. You should want to hear from African leaders. And yet, if I asked you now to name 3 African leaders, I'm sure many of you would struggle. I should also point out for you that over 60% of Africans are under the age of 24. That's right, over 60% of Africans are under the age of 24. We have a very, very young population. In some countries, over 50% of the population is under the age of 15. So we've got a young population, and many people in here who have been to Africa will know what I'm talking about when I say if you go to the big cities in Africa, Lagos, Nairobi, Lusaka, there are lots of young people all over the streets selling trinkets from China, DVDs, T-shirts, geese, mirrors. I'm sure people know what I'm talking about. The question then becomes, what's going to happen in 10 years? Many of these people are like the high school students that are in the audience. They've gone through high school, and they can read and write, but there are no job opportunities. This is the state of the African continent in many places today. Before I go into the specific reasons why it is that aid, which is a good idea, is failing to do what it's supposed to do, remember, create growth and reduce poverty, I just want to also say that there's a fundamental problem with the celebrity culture that I want to highlight here. First of all, their whole PR agenda is negative. I accept that they do have many followers. Many of us love their music. But why use the platform to push a negative agenda? In the book, I talk about the 4 horsemen of Africa's apocalypse. The fact that we always focus on things like war, disease, corruption, and poverty when we think about Africa. We seem to forget that there are more poor Chinese people on earth than there are poor Africans. There are more poor Indians on earth than there are poor Africans. And yet we don't feel sorry for the Chinese, nor do we feel sorry for the Indians. And you rarely see on television pictures of poor Chinese children starving or living in a destitute way. So in your minds and in the minds of many people, including potential investors into our economies that could create jobs, there's only a picture of destitution and despair when it comes to the African continent. We're suffering from a serious PR disaster, and unfortunately, the celebrities have capitalized on that. I wish they would use their platform to push a positive message about the African people. That would help to create jobs and to bring other investment from outside.